Welcome to another installment of Donning the Armor. This morning we will begin in Joshua chapter 3, verse 1. Then Joshua rose early in the morning, and they set out from Acacia Grove and came to the Jordan, he and all the children of Israel, and lodged there before they crossed over. So it was after 3 days that the officers went through the camp, and they commanded the people, saying, When you see the ark of the covenant of the Lord your God, the priests, the Levites bearing it, then you shall set out from your place and go after it. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, about 2,000 cubits by measure. Do not come near it, that you may know the way which you must go, for you have not passed this way before. So now Joshua is rising early in the morning. He's coming to set out from the Acacia Grove, coming out to the Jordan, and telling the officers, now 3 days are up, we're going to go cross over the Jordan, and commanding the people that, look, the Ark of the Covenant is going to go out before you. But it's not like it was before. It's not going to be as it was before in the wilderness, when the Lord was sending you out, was leading you ahead. It's not going to happen anymore. Things are different now that you're going into the promised land. Things are going to be very, very different. So now you're going to want to leave a space between you and it so that you guys can actually see where you are going and where the Ark of the Covenant is leading you. Because you've never been in this land before. For 40 years, you've been wandering this wilderness. You guys have been walking around in circles. You've seen places, you've seen them again. But now, you've never been this way. It was an 11-day journey from Sinai to where we're at now. You took 38 years by wandering around. So you've seen everything there is to see in that area. But now, you're going to be seeing something different. You're going to be in a new place. Make sure you don't get too close so you can continue to see where you're headed. And Joshua said to the people, Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you. Then Joshua spoke to the priests, saying, Take up the Ark of the Covenant and cross over before the people. So they took up the Ark of the Covenant and went before the people. So now sanctify yourselves, because the Lord is going to work wonders. Sanctify yourselves, make sure you're set holy and apart for Him, because we're going into the promised land, and the Lord's going to do great and mighty things to bring us to our inheritance, to fulfill the promises He's made for all these centuries. We are now in that time to go into the promised land. I mean, think about what that must be like. We hear the mockers and the scoffers all the time. Jesus Christ coming soon, since 33 AD. Oh, they've been saying that for 2,000 years. What makes you think you live in the generation that Jesus is going to come? I don't know. I mean, I can see the signs of degeneration to the point where it looks like even Christians are turning away, and the great apostasy is upon us by people proclaiming Christ while following politics, and by following the wickedness of their own heart, and following their own desires, and following the hatred they have of other people instead of the love they should have towards other people. But think about how great it was. Think about all of the years that Isaac heard Abraham speak of the covenant he made with God. Think about all the years that Esau and Jacob heard Isaac speak of the covenant that was made with God. Think about all the years that the 12 sons of Jacob had to hear about the covenant made with God. Think about all the generations. 400 years of generations growing up through Egypt, some in absolute freedom before they became slaves. They weren't slaves always for 400 years. they were in a foreign land for 400 years. They were slaves for a good portion of it, but not for the entirety of it. But hearing this, one day the Lord will bring you out of this land and take you to the land of your fathers. One day the Lord will bring you out of this land and take you to that promised land. One day the Lord will bring you forth and take you there. One day, generation after generation after generation after generation for 400 years. And how it must feel to now be that generation. To be that generation who now sees the fulfillment of the promises. How wondrous will it be for that generation of Christians who get to see the rapture, who get to see the second coming of Christ, depending on where you want to put your eschatology. What will it be to feel like to be that generation that finally sees the fulfillment of God's promises? This generation is getting to see it now. They are now on the banks of the Jordan. They are now getting ready to cross over. Something 400 plus years of people have dreamed about doing. They're going to get to do it. How many mockers, how many scoffers? They already turned away once because of them. How many mockers and scoffers told them the Lord would never see them through to this? But for those who had heart, for those who continued to hope on the promises of God, this is the generation that finally gets to see it. And how amazing it must have been to finally be in that generation to say, I am getting to witness the promises of God being fulfilled. You know, we live our lives half in and half out of wishing to see God's promises fulfilled. We wish for the Lord to come. We wish for him to take us up. We wish for the coming kingdom of God. But at the same time, we keep one foot in not wanting to miss out on this world. But I know if we end up being the generation that sees God return, how amazing that feeling will be. How amazing for our children if it's them, or our grandchildren if it's them, or our great-grandchildren, or whoever it is down the line if it's them. Because it will come. The promise will be fulfilled, just as it is for these people. And how glorious and wondrous it will be in that day. And the Lord spoke to Joshua, this day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. You shall command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant, saying, when you have come to the edge of the water of the Jordan, you shall stand in the Jordan. So now the Lord is saying, as they all exalted Moses, now people are going to look to you in the same way as my appointed leader. So now you're going to tell the priests to go bear that ark of the covenant into the Jordan River. So Joshua said to the children of Israel, come here and hear the words of the Lord your God. And Joshua said, by this you shall know that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out from before you the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Hivites, and the Perizzites, the Girgasites, and the Amorites, and the Jebusites. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord of all the earth is crossing over before you into the Jordan. So the Jordan will dry up. But not when the priests go through, not before they go through. They are going to walk into the waters of the Jordan, bearing this heavy, gold-laden ark of the covenant. They're going to walk into the waters, trusting the Lord to see them through, trusting they won't fall over, trusting they won't be washed away with the river, trusting that the Lord will do the miraculous as he has promised to do, and as they have beheld him doing in the past. Behold, the ark of the covenant of the Lord, the earth is crossing over before you into the Jordan. Now therefore take for yourselves 12 men from the tribes of Israel, 1 man from every tribe. And it shall come to pass, as soon as the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of the Jordan, that the waters of the Jordan shall be cut off, and the waters that come from upstream, they shall stand as a heap. So as soon as they are in the midst of it, the river will just stop flowing. As if a dam is built upstream, the water will just be cut off and will dry up, and you will walk across. Not quite as dramatic as the Red Sea being split with the armies of Egypt chasing after them, but miraculous nonetheless, that the waters of the Jordan just stop, are cut off and dammed off, and that they shall stand in a heap upstream, allowing the people to cross. So it was when the people set out from their camp to cross over the Jordan, with the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people. And as those who bore the ark came to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests who bore the ark dipped into the edge of the water, for the Jordan overflows all its banks during the whole time of harvest, that the waters which came down from upstream stood still, and rose in a heap very far away at Adam, the city that is beside Zaretan. So the waters that went down into the sea of the Arabah, the salt sea, failed and were cut off, and the people crossed over opposite Jericho. Then the priests who bore the ark of the covenant stood firm on dry ground in the midst of the Jordan, and all Israel crossed over the dry ground until all the people had crossed completely over the Jordan. So all these people going across, millions of people. The priests stop, though. They stop in the dry ground of the Jordan until all the people have crossed. The first one in, the Ark of the Covenant, the presence of the Lord among his people, the first into the waters, and the last one out. The first one into the trial to see his people through safely, and the last one out behind them. We are not in this alone. He goes before us. He sees us to safety. He does what is good when we are willing to place our faith in him. These priests didn't know what was going to happen. They were just told to walk the Ark of the Covenant into the water. And it did. They're told to do what the Lord says and commands. So they do. Joshua is told to lead his people, so he does. The people are told to cross, so they do. Doing as the Lord commanded, and great things coming from it. Even in the book of Joshua, we don't even need to get the judges. We will see the people fail. We will see the people stumble. We will see the people allow the base lusts of their heart to overcome the holiness with which they're supposed to live their lives, and the righteousness they're supposed to walk out. But this is such a sign of everything that is to come for this people, that the Lord will go before them and see them through the trial. See them through the trial as they go forth in his will, and make sure nothing happens. The last one out, leaving none behind, leaving none to straggle by themselves and struggle to keep up, but to go forth, see you through, and help you see your task through to completion. But moving on to chapter 4. And it came to pass, when all the people had completely crossed over the Jordan, that the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, Take for yourselves 12 men from the people, 1 man from every tribe, and command them, saying, Take for yourselves 12 stones from here, out of the midst of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet stood firm, You shall carry them over with you and leave them in the lodging place where you lodge tonight. Then Joshua called the 12 men whom he had appointed from the children of Israel, one man from every tribe, and Joshua said to them, cross over before the ark of the Lord your God up into the midst of the Jordan, and each of you take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of tribes of the children of Israel, that this may be a sign among you when your children ask in time to come, saying, what do these stones mean to you? Then you shall answer to them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it crossed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be a memorial to the children of Israel forever. So setting up a marker to remember. Why to remember? Because future generations will come and ask why this is here. And so you don't forget the past. This is here because this is the miracle the Lord did before us. This is how he brought us over the Jordan. He cut off the waters. He allowed us to come through on dry water. This is the symbol, the marker of this. Learn, child, from our past so you know how to walk in the righteousness of the Lord in the future, to walk through the way he commanded. He commanded us to walk over this river. So we did. He commanded us to create this marker, this memorial, to show what he had done so we can teach you, so you can teach your child when they ask. Because the Lord God is forever, and we will forever be his children. So forever teach our traditions. And the children of Israel did so just as Joshua commanded, and took up 12 stones from the midst of the Jordan, as the Lord had spoken to Joshua, according to the number of the tribes of the children of Israel, and carried them over with them to place where they lodged, and laid them down there. Then Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests who bore the ark of the covenant stood, and they are there to this day. So they have one stack brought by the tribes themselves and placed where they lodge. And then Joshua would set up 12 stones himself in the midst of the Jordan. And they were there to this day. The time where this document is being written, the author is letting the people of Israel know that these stones that Joshua stacked are still there. They are still there, preserved as a memorial for us, to know our history and to teach our children, to remember the glory and greatness of the Lord. So the priests who bore the ark stood in the midst of the Jordan until everything was finished, that the Lord had commanded Joshua to speak to the people according to all Moses had commanded Joshua. And the people hurried and crossed over. Then it came to pass, when all the people had completely crossed over, that the ark of the Lord and the priests crossed over in the presence of the people. And the men of Reuben, the men of Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh crossed over armed before the children of Israel, as Moses had spoken to them. About 40,000 prepared for war crossed over before the Lord in the battle, to the plains of Jericho. On that day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they feared him as they feared Moses all the days of his life. So as the water, as everyone is finished, the ark comes back over. The people have come over. They've set up their monuments. Now the people of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh come over armed. But they come over as 40,000. Now, if you remember, they did a census, and they had, roughly off the top of my head, about 167,000 people armed for war, 170,000 people, maybe even a little bit more. So only 40,000 come over, though. Most stay back. And it could be seen as a breaking of the oath that they made. They made an oath that we would go over and fight. And then they send over 40,000 people. Far less than they could have added. But Joshua did tell them before they left, send out your mighty men of valor to come across and do battle. So in this, it seems as though, although they didn't send all the men they had to war, they sent out their best, their most powerful, most valiant warriors are now crossing over. They didn't want the people who would hamper the army by having, half their mind toward the battle and half their mind toward home, but only the most valiant among them to go out and do battle, to place their lives on the line, to do as they promised the Lord they would do, to see the entirety of the nation of Israel brought forth into their inheritance. And because of what is happening with the Jordan, because they finally crossed over, now Joshua's been exalted. He's been shown to be the ruler. We see this in a way with Elisha and Elijah. Elijah is crossing the river. He uses his mantle, his cloak, to split the waters apart by slapping it. He asks Elisha, "Elisha, what do you wish?" And Elisha says, I wish to have twice as much of the Spirit as you. Twice as much power as you. Maybe because not so much he wanted to be even greater than Elijah, but maybe because he felt he was only half as good as Elijah. That Elijah was so great in his eyes that he needed twice as much of Elijah's spirit just to match Elijah. And then as he's coming back across the river, he performs the same feat. The Lord allows him to show that he has the Spirit upon him as Elijah did. And when he slaps the mantle, Elijah's mantle against the water, it splits the water, just as Elijah had done. In this same way, Joshua is now being exalted in the eyes of the people so that they see he is a worthy successor to Moses, where Moses was seen as being the one that split the Red Sea. Now Joshua is the one that's brought them across the Jordan. Then the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, "Command the priests who bear the ark of the testimony to come up from the Jordan." Joshua therefore commanded the priests, saying, "Come up from the Jordan." And it came to pass, when the priests who bore the ark of the covenant of the Lord had come from the midst of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet touched the dry land, that the waters of the Jordan returned to their place, and overflowed all its banks as before. Now the people came up from the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they camped in Gilgal, on the east border of Jericho. And those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan, Joshua set up in Gilgal. Then he spoke to the children of Israel, saying, "When your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, 'What are these stones?' then you shall let your children know, saying, 'Israel crossed over this Jordan on dry land, for the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you had crossed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up before us until we had crossed over, that all the peoples of the earth may know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that you may fear the Lord your God forever.'" What are these stones? Why are these things here? Our testimonies can be powerful things. And sometimes when it comes to evangelism, we use our testimony. Sometimes we just preach the gospel, which is probably best. But when it comes to our children, I have noticed a habit of Christians, I guess I could call it a habit, of not wanting to explain their testimony to their own children, because they don't want their children to romanticize the sin with which they came out of, and think maybe I need to engage in that as well, so that I have a great testimony of my own. But what are these stones here for? What are these memorials? Why are they here? What are they for? Think of these memorial stones as scars. How did you get that scar on your arm, under your eye? What's that scar on your forehead or on your fingers? You know, oftentimes we don't have a problem telling those stories to our kids, regaling them with tales of, I was climbing this fence when I was your age from a dog, and my hand caught on the metal hook and it sliced me open, and then I had to go get like 7 stitches, and we don't have a problem with that. But when it comes to the scars our sin left on us, sometimes we have a problem telling that. Now, of course, we need to be age appropriate depending on the age of our kids, but as our kids do begin to age, the age where they'll start to fall into the problems that we fell into, what are these here for? This is because this is what the Lord your God did, child. How powerful our own testimony can be for our children. Not to withhold it, but to explain, these are the scars I have. These are the stones and markers of my life. This is the testimony of where the Lord has taken me and how he led me from the darkness, from the servitude and bondage of my sin, and brought me through the baptism of the Red Sea, and brought me through the baptism of the Spirit of the Jordan, the baptism of the water of the Red Sea, the baptism of the Spirit of the Jordan, and has brought me into this walk with him through the promised land. This walk of not into heaven, but being into his presence here on earth. To fight the temptations, to fight the battles, to face the giants of our lives. This is what the Lord has brought us to do. This is my testimony. This is how these things have transpired. This is the glorious work of the Lord. I wasn't perfect. You're not going to be perfect. But we have a perfect one looking out for us. And this is how he brought me to this spot. How powerful that message can be for our children. When we're not so busy trying to put up a wall of perfection for them to look at. When it says to reflect the image of God and reflect the light of his grace on our children, it's not to try to look like we have never made a mistake in our lives. It's to reflect his love and his mercy that he has showed upon us, on them. So they understood that we have had an abundance of grace poured out upon us, and an overwhelming amount of mercy that we do not deserve poured out upon us. And we have been forgiven in a way that we should never have been forgiven. So we reflected on them so they understand the forgiveness they have and will have, so that they don't make the mistakes we made, so they do better than we did, so they don't stumble in the ways we stumble. Because for all the dramatic testimonies that we can ever hear, I came from drugs, I came from gangs, I came from violence, the greatest testimony that could ever be told is my parents told me about Jesus. As a little kid, I accepted him as a baby, and I've never turned from him. I have trusted him for every step I've taken. I've stumbled a little here and there, but I've never lost my faith. I've never turned my eyes from him. I have never stopped speaking to him. I've never stopped praying. I have never stopped being in communication. I have never stopped trusting him for the path in my life. I have never stopped trusting him with the important decisions in my life. I have never overlooked my provisions and my blessings. I have trusted him every step of the way, and he has never let me down. That is the greatest testimony. Because that's a testimony and perseverance in love. I don't have that testimony. I have a testimony of stupidity, stumbling, and rebellion. One that I don't want others, let alone my children, falling into. But that's no reason to keep my testimony from them. Because they need to understand that I am just as flawed as they are. That their mother is just as flawed as they are. That their neighbor is just as flawed as they are. And that it is but by the grace of God and His abundant mercy that we are able to feel His embrace. Because as much as we are capable of any kind of love at our human, flawed state, we can not even comprehend the love He has for us in His perfection. A love that is so perfect and pure that ours is a shadow, a dirty shadow in comparison. He loves us in such a pure way, we can't understand it fully because we are tainted by the selfishness of the love that we wish to give out. What are these stones for? So you shall let your children know. What are your scars there for? What are the markers in your life there for? Let your children know so they understand the glory and grace that God has with each of His flawed creation and the gloriousness with which He pours out blessings upon His children. Because they are His children, not ours. His. And they deserve every bit of that love and that knowledge that we sit in. Sit, Walk, Stand. It's a book by Watchman Nee. Actually, probably have it over here, to be honest with you. Because I have my 10-year-old reading it. Sit in the finished work of the cross of Jesus. He has done everything. Walk in His righteousness and stand before the enemy. That is something these Israelites are going to have to do at every stage. What are the stones there for? What are those memorials there for? What are those scars there for? That's where I learned to sit in His finished work. Where I walked in His righteousness with Him. And where I stood before the enemy. In His grace, in His honor, and in His love. All glory to God, because He's laid it all out for us and given us the strength to go forth in it. So that's where we will finish for this morning. I hope this was fruitful for you. Hope to see you back again next time. But until then, be blessed.